Marriage is supposed to be one of the happiest and clearly most personal and most significant moments in life. But it's not so easy in Israel if you happen to belong to one of the following groups. If you're not recognized as Jewish according to Halacha, as interpreted by the Orthodox rabbinate, the Rabbanut, if you're a member of the LGBT community, if you are a Kohen who wants to marry a divorcee, if you are someone who was converted or whose mother was converted by a Reform or conservative rabbi outside of Israel, and now even we're discovering even by some Orthodox rabbis who are not on a secret list. I'm talking about North American rabbis, diaspora rabbis. If you are anyone who wishes to be married in a ceremony not conducted by an Orthodox rabbi. And the same situation applies to a not very happy moment, divorce. In Israel, there may be more than 1,000 agunot, chained women, whose husbands refuse to give them a get, a Jewish divorce decree, and who therefore cannot get out of an unhappy, perhaps even abusive marriage, and cannot remarry, and whose future children will be considered mamzerim, bastards. The Orthodox religious court is the only one that can process divorce in Israel, even if you got married outside of Israel. We are honored to introduce a panel of individuals, each of whom has much to say on the topic of civil marriage or freedom to marry in Israel, from the viewpoints of academia, politics, political activism, personal experience, as well as the status quo and why the current structure should remain as is.
Thank you, Susie. It's really an important step forward in the history of the GAs to be able to discuss amongst us and with you a topic that for too long has been sort of kept under wraps, kept pushed under the carpet, even though it is most critical, both in terms of impacting on democracy and Judaism in Israel and on world Jewry. At Chidush, a few months ago on Lag BaOmer, we launched a new mini-site that looks at the state of freedom of marriage around the world. Much to our surprise, it took some research because there was no available list of how freedom of marriage fares in all the world's countries. So we researched 194 countries, and the conclusion was quite striking, as you can see it visually on the map. We divided the world in this interactive map, and the URL is marriage.chidush.org. We divided the world into 3 categories: those countries in black that have severe restrictions on the right to marry, those countries in gray that have some restrictions, and the countries in white that have freedom of marriage. When you log on to the website, you'll see that we dedicate a whole chapter to the issue of same-sex marriages and explain why, because of the small number of countries that's recognized at this point, relatively small, countries that recognize civil unions or marriages for same-sex couples, we did not use that as the overriding principle. So there are 45 countries in the world that impose severe restrictions on the right to marry of their citizens. Israel is the only and one democracy in the world that falls into that category. As you can see, those who are familiar with the layout of the world, the neighborhood we are in is not a particularly enviable one. Now, it's very important for me to stress, as we look at that map, that this is not because what the people of Israel wish. As a matter of fact, our continued and repeated study of public opinion in Israel, which you can see on the Chidush website under the title of the Israel Religion and State Index, and we repeatedly poll a wide sample of Israelis on a variety of issues of religion and state. One of the questions we ask is, do you support equal recognition for Reform and conservative rabbis? And as you can see, 67% of Israelis support granting by the government of that equality. But But we also asked, of course, the question regarding marriage. Do you support that civil marriage, as well as Reform and conservative marriage, should be recognized in Israel? And as you can see, 62% of the overall Israeli adult population supports freedom of marriage. And it's even more interesting to look at the breakdown according to people's voting patterns, namely, whom did they vote in the last elections in January? So as you can see, 93% of Atnua, Meretz, Kadima, 91% of Labour voters, 88% of Yesh Atid voters, and even 61% of Likud Beiteinu voters support granting equal recognition and freedom of choice, including civil, reform, and conservative marriages. Now, what is the significance of all of that, and why is it so important for the GA to discuss it? Because the reality today is, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, will not change the facts. The majority of the next generation of American Jewry would not be eligible to legally marry in Israel. The majority of the next generation, your children, grandchildren, and some of you may qualify in that category, would be told by Israel, yes, you may come here under the law of return. As a matter of fact, in my hat as a lawyer, I won those landmark victories in the Supreme Court that won the right to make aliyah and registering in the civil registry as Jews for those who were converted Reform or conservative. But none of you who fall into that category will be able to marry in Israel. How is that going to bode for the future of Israel's relationship with world Jewry in general and American Jewry in particular? Not well. I suggest to you that the thought that we can, as Prime Minister Netanyahu suggested, pour hundreds of millions of dollars and come up with multiplied birthright, multiplied Masa, new educational initiatives, new programs, and all of that is going to patch up those differences, is not going to happen. To the extent the next generation is going to be told, as it is told today, you do not have an equal place at the table, that is not going to be the basis for the kind of solidarity and partnership that we wish. And it's important for you to realize this is not something that Israelis differ from you on. And fighting for the right to marry, for marriage equality, for freedom of marriage, is probably the most pro-Israel initiative that you can engage in. And partnering with the many Israeli organizations, individuals, and at this point, not just secular, not just reform, not just conservative, but I assume we'll be hearing from Professor Ruth halperin-kaddari, that which we have seen recently in a book by two other leading Orthodox scholars that call for a civil framework for marriage and divorce in Israel. With that in mind, and I look forward to the questions that will follow after the panel, I suggest to you, there is nothing that can make Israel more Jewish and more democratic than living up to the founding principles of freedom of religion and conscience as promised in Israel's Declaration of Independence. There is nothing that is essential for the future healthy relationship between Israel and the diaspora as allowing all Jews equal place at the table, freedom of marriage for all.
I'm happy to be here because this is a matter that, that is very important to us in the Knesset. And me as a member of Knesset who is leading this legislation is extremely excited to share this experience with you. As you may all know, in Israel we don't have a separation between state and church, we don't have a constitution, and so the religious establishment is part of the state establishment. And if I, let's say, would like to marry a girl or a man, then the only channel is through me as a Jewish person in Israel, is through the rabbinical court. Something that is causing a lot of trouble and a lot of problems to hundreds of thousands of Israelis. What we would like to happen in Israel is to establish civil marriage as an alternative path to the religious marriage. People who would like to maintain religious marriage and to marry within the Rabbanut or within the Muslim courts or the Christian courts, because, you know, the non-separation between state and church is not only for Jews in this country, but also for the other religious groups. Then they will be able to do it through the current religious path. But for all those people who cannot and do not want to marry through the religious system, then there would be an alternative civil path through civil marriage. Now, on the table nowadays in Israel, there are many proposals regarding partnership, common life, as they call common law marriage, all sorts of arrangements in order to solve this problem. But there is only one true solution to this problem, to this unbelievable problem we have in Israel, and this is an alternative civil marriage. Now, this would imply for people from different religious groups who for nowadays they cannot marry in Israel, this would imply for non-Orthodox Jewish denominations who are now, their marriages are not recognized in Israel, for instance, Reform or Conservative or Secular. This would imply for gay couples. This would imply for people who the Rabbanut itself is preventing them from marriage, let's say, for instance, a divorced woman and a Kohen, and all sorts of other things. Nowadays, the figures are just unbelievable. A quarter of Israelis, more than 10,000 couples a year, marry outside of Israel. 10,000 couples a year cannot implement their basic right for family and marriage in their own country, in our own country in Israel. Now, this is of extreme importance for you as well. If we wish to remain together, if we wish to continue our cooperation, then you need to raise your voice on this issue. Most of the Jewish people, most of the Jews in the United States are not ultra-Orthodox, Haredi, etc. They belong to other groups and denominations. And it is of extreme importance for you and for us that we would act this and we would battle this issue together. Now is the opportunity, Susie. And I'm telling this to you as well because I know that you're very active on this. There is a window of opportunities now opening for us in this current seat of the Knesset. In this coming month, we would have to decide on a whole array of bills regarding this, I don't know, new form of partnership or marriage or whatever. We should not miss this opportunity. If we miss this opportunity now, and we would have just to, you know, to please some political fractions, an incomplete arrangement, then we would cry about it for generations. But if we manage, with your help of the Jewish diaspora, with the non-Orthodox Jewish denominations, with other religious groups in Israel, with activists, with human rights activists, with women, with gay people, with the gay movement, to form a new arrangement of an alternative, equal, civil marriage, then this would be a great revolution in Israel. This would influence directly on the lives of hundreds of thousands of Israelis, but not just for those who marry outside the Rabbanut. This would influence also those who marry within the Rabbanut, because the Rabbanut and the ultra-Orthodox religious establishment would have to be much more tolerant, much more open-minded, and much more humane towards women, towards Olim from Russia, towards Olim from Ethiopia, from all those who are now go through hell when they want to fulfill this very basic right of getting married in Israel. So I expect, and I tell you this as an Israeli legislator, I expect your help. You prove that on other issues before, for instance, this issue of conversion in the last Knesset, when you mobilized to help us, the progressive forces in Israel, we succeeded. Now we have this window of opportunity, and I hope that with your help, we would not miss this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm really grateful for the organizers of this very important session to having invited me and have the opportunity to address this significant audience here. And I agree wholeheartedly, it is one of the most important key issues in the sustainable future of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. I first want to emphasize where I come from. I come to this issue, first of all, as an expert on international human rights and women's rights and family law, as a law professor, and as a member of that UN committee that oversees the implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women on all the countries in the world. So I'm sitting there at the UN and hearing almost 200 reports by now talking about the situation of women worldwide. And I come here, most importantly, as a halachically committed Jewish woman, and as an expert in Jewish law. And based on all these factual, personal backgrounds, I emphasize that the lack of civil marriages and divorce in Israel are indeed a shame on Israel's democracy. And we've seen it perfectly in such a visually graphic manner in the presentation of Uri Regev before. The lack is a stain on Israel's democracy, and I, like so many others here, I'm sure everybody here, deeply cares about Israel's democracy. But the shame of democracy here is not only because so many of us cannot marry in Israel, which is really the gravest human rights violation. The stain and the shame comes from the fact that this is the most blatant, formal violation of gender equality, of discrimination against women in Israel. And in the name of preserving the unity of the Jewish nation, that is usually the pretext for preserving and continuing the exclusivity of religious marriage and divorce in Israel. In the name of preserving Jewish unity, it is at the expense of women and children. Because the way Jewish divorce works under Jewish law is that the total control over the divorce is given to the man. And it is only on his own free will that a divorce can halachically take place. And to achieve this cooperation of the man, women have to pay every day, and women pay every day in the court. At the Rackman Center, we conducted already for the second time a survey to understand the phenomena of get refusals. And what we explained is that the official numbers are completely meaningless. We have to go and ask the women themselves and to hear the experiences of the women. And the phenomena of what I call the get abuse is really mind-boggling. We found out that 1 in every 3 divorces that take place in Israel, and when it comes to the Orthodox community, it is 1 in every 2nd woman who is under the threat of being refused the get, and as we all know, if she's being refused the get, she cannot continue with her life. At the Rackman Center, we have clients who are 25, 28, 30 years old who've been agunot and being refused the get for more than 10 years, and they cannot join another man, they cannot start a new family, because if they do, their future children are going to be mamzerim who cannot enter the Jewish world, who cannot marry within the Jewish community. So the threat of being refused the get is the key factor that influences the dynamics of divorce in Israel. And indeed, 1 in every 3, or again, among the Orthodox women, it is 1 in every 2 divorces that end up in a settlement that deviates from the woman's rights under the secular law. This is the get abuse. This is the extortion that goes on a daily basis in the rabbinical courts, in the dynamics of divorce in Israel. I agree wholeheartedly that the way to work is to introduce civil marriages and divorce in Israel. But what I want everybody to understand is just like the words that we read a few weeks ago in Kohelet, Echos b'zeh, v'gam mizeh al tanach yadcha. Do this, grip onto this, but don't let go on this. And the other issue is to amend the Jewish law from within, is to make use of the tools that the Jewish law gives us to make marriages and divorces under Jewish law and within the halacha totally egalitarian. And there are ways to do it, but these ways are not being implemented by the dayanim in the rabbinical courts in Israel. At the Rackman Center, we work on both ways. It is a dual-track solution. We need you to introduce civil marriages and divorce in Israel, but we also need you to help us do the work within the halacha and within the religious system, and to have more daring dayanim worldwide to join forces and to have an international rabbinical court that will employ the prenuptial agreements, that introduce conditions on the kiddushin, that employ such solutions as the bitul kiddushin, an invalidation of kiddushin when the circumstances warrant this way of going on. And there are ways to do that, and we never have to focus only on the one direction. We have to realize, going back to the survey that was shown before, that when asked not just whether you support civil marriages and divorces, but whether you yourself will want to civilly marry, the numbers are lower. Most of the people in Israel would still want to marry within halacha and within Jewish law, and therefore we have to join forces and do everything that we can to have this track as egalitarian and non-discriminatory as civil marriages. Thank you.
I'm here just to tell, at this point, my story, to put a face to this issue. So I was born in Canada. My mother converted conservatively before I was born. I was raised with a strong Jewish identity, but relatively unaffiliated and uneducated, despite going to Hebrew school and having a bat mitzvah. And then when we moved to the States, I continued and did some learning at our synagogue after. But other than that, I really wasn't connected to the Jewish community. I didn't really know, looking back now, what it meant to be Jewish. It's a pretty interesting paradox. I graduated university and moved back to Canada. I was working for a while, and I decided that, like a lot of young people, I wanted to go out and find myself. I was a little confused about what I wanted to do with my life. And I was looking at options around the world. I was looking at India and China, Latin America. And in Toronto, I started to attend a Jewish learning class, and I got a little more interested in what was going on in Israel. I'd never been here before. Had met through my aunt who lives there, a few people who were coming back and forth from Israel for the first time in my life, really. And I thought, wow, maybe Israel would be a good place. And I found a program called Otzma. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. And it combines things that was very interesting to me, including Jewish education and learning. And I came for the year, and I fell in love with this country. Began to fall in love with Judaism the more I engaged with it. And I decided to stay another year turned into another year, and I made Aliyah, and that was over 8 years ago. I still have a bed in Toronto waiting for me to come back and get it, actually. A few years later, I met Ariel. And we fell in love, and we wanted to get married. And this was, actually, just before that, which is, sorry, is when I was on Otzma, actually, it was the first time that anyone said to me, oh, you're not Jewish. And it shocked me. I can still remember, I was shocked and I was enraged. And that rage actually still stays with me when I'm confronted with this issue, or someone confronts me about this issue. I'm Jewish, and no one can tell me whether or not I am. It's a central part of my identity, and it's a central part of our life now, and no one can take that away. So when we started this conversation about, okay, we want to get married, where, what, how, I told Ariel, I don't think I can get married in this country, from what I've heard. And he said, you know what, it's crazy. And let me go check it out. It's very important to me that I want a marriage with a rabbanut. I want a halachic marriage, and it's very important to me. And I said, okay, you have my blessing to go look, but I don't think it's going to work. He came back and he said, listen, you can do it if you convert. And I said no. I said, there's no, even if it was an expedited conversion, which is complicated still, I said, I choose to say no. I choose that I'm not going to let anyone take away my identity even if they promise to give it back. So we said okay, and we set out to look at the rules and what we could do, and we decided to get married abroad and have what was very, very important to us, that we have a halachic wedding in Israel. Now, in what we understand and what we know, it doesn't need to be, halachic you don't need to be married by a rabbi for it to be a halachic wedding. And so we learned the ceremony, we studied, we had a beit din with very, very knowledgeable friends, really, 3 people that helped us build our ceremony and learn about the Jewish tradition of marriage and the ceremony itself. And we had a halachic wedding in Israel that was, what's the word in English?
Now criminal.
Yeah, that was, our friends married us, I'm losing the word, but was married by 2 friends of ours who are Orthodox, very knowledgeable Jews, and who would now be considered criminals, and we would be considered criminals as well. And I think that's what we're here to really talk about today, is that Ariel and I live a Jewish life. We keep Shabbat, we're Shomer Kashrut. We identify and are very engaged with the Jewish people, not just within Israel, but within the world. We come from abroad and we are here now. And therefore, this issue is central to us and our lives, and the lives of our daughter, who is now considered Jewish by the Rabbanut. And I don't believe, both of us don't believe, that the system that says that we do not belong is legitimate. Therefore, it should not be allowed to continue this way. And it's to me, it's a hard fight, but it's an easy decision. Thank you.
I get extra time. I'm 1 against 5. Leaders of the Jewish Federation of North America, fellow panelists, Ms. Susie Gelman, delegates to the General Assembly, you, who are our beloved brothers and sisters who do so much for our people. Thank you and welcome. We are one family, one people with one destiny, but even in the best of families, there can be differing opinions. Should the Orthodox establishment continue to have exclusive authority over marriage and divorce in the Jewish state? And my answer is yes. That's why you invited me, otherwise you don't need me. But isn't it unfair? Why should the rabbinate have exclusive authority? Let me explain. No democracy is an absolute democracy, and no system can be absolutely fair. Inherent in democracy are rules, laws, and regulations. We all pay taxes, have our health care plans canceled. You know about that. Take off shoes when entering a mosque, and stop at red lights. Democracy without laws is chaos and destruction. Our democratic America, the beacon of liberty, is governed by the Constitution and the court's understanding of it. All the more so Israel, which is not only a democratic state, but a Jewish state, has laws and regulations. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. From Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. No one could have said it better than my favorite cabinet minister, Secretary of the Treasury, Yair Lapid, who said as follows: in the state of Israel, there will be no separation of religion and state. I quote. This will not happen here because the state of Israel, in contrast to most countries, is not just a place, but an idea. The state of Israel is defined legally and according to the opinion of the vast majority of its citizens as a Jewish and democratic state. Our Supreme Court, Justice Barak was mentioned before, and I think this was his ruling, reflects this synthesis in many of its rulings. One example being its approach to local laws that forbade the selling of non-kosher meat, pig meat especially. The court upheld the laws within city, residential, and commercial areas, but not for industrial areas at the outskirts of the towns. As a people and a state, we have grappled with this synthesis of Jewish alongside democracy and vice versa. The compromise that has been worked out and accepted by all Israeli governments since the creation of the state is called the status quo, which basically says that one can do as he wishes in his personal life. You don't have to fast on Yom Kippur, you can live with anyone you want, same-sex, non-Jewish partners, etc. But in the public domain, the state as the state respects Jewish halachic tradition. I must stress that love has nothing to do with the status quo. Everyone can do his or her thing, but a Jewish state need not recognize it. We shouldn't forget that our claim to this land is unique. It is biblical. This is the land that God gave to our forefathers as written in the Torah. At the Peel Commission in the late 1930s, when asked what our claim to this land was, our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, took out a Bible from his pocket and declared, "This book is our deed to this land." If we jettison our Torah values, we are forfeiting our right to this land. By recognizing ways of life that go against the Bible, we are making a mockery of ourselves to anyone who follows the Bible. There's another point worth addressing. You are all aware of the Pew survey of a 71% intermarriage rate amongst the non-Orthodox Jews in America. There's no rabbinate in America, and there's nobody to blame there. You are aware of the decline of temple membership. There was a recent article in the Jerusalem Post that conservative and reform temples are renting out space to Orthodox groups. You know better than I do of all the non-affiliated Jews, and they will not support UJA and Federation. With all this said, what message are we sending them if our Jewish state recognizes civil marriage, which includes marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew? Will we be able to stand up to intermarriage, which is the greatest existential danger facing our people, if we recognize it? The rabbinate has responsibility for every Jew, and so do you. There are those in the rabbinate who say, enough. Why should they dislike us? Our children are shielded. Leave them alone. Let them do what they want. This day may come. I hope not. But it will be a sad day when one Jew doesn't care for the spiritual welfare of his brother. This fight is for you, for your children and grandchildren, for the future of Judaism here and all over the world. With God's help, you and us will jointly succeed in this sacred endeavor. Tomorrow you will visit the Kotel, the Western Wall, the wall of history and holiness. You will be standing in the palace of the King of all kings, and surely you will return to your communities and tell them, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people are alive, and yes, Od Avinu Chai, our history, our traditions live on. Let us tell our youth the eternal truth. From Zion shall go forth Torah. This is what will save us. Thank you. I have 20 seconds left. There are 10,000 Israelis who get married outside of Israel. 3,000 are ultra-Orthodox couples who go home to America or to other places to get married within their communities. Another significant number are situations where both are non-Jewish. The number of Jewish Israelis who leave the country to get married is minimal. Thank you.
Following on what Rav Elefantz has just said, I think most of us would agree that it's important to maintain Israel as a Jewish state. So if so, what would separation of religion and state, or even just taking away the religious authority to sanction and oversee marriage and divorce, do to the nature of Israel as a Jewish state?
I don't think that we are discussing separation of religion and state. We are discussing breathing life into and fully realizing Israel's own founding promise in our own Declaration of Independence for freedom of religion and equality. This is not an import from the West. This is a vision of Israel which is both Jewish and democratic. The irony is that Professor Ruth Halperin-Kaddari, as she explained, or Professor Schiffman, or recently Rabbi Avi Weiss was quoted as saying Israel needs civil marriage and reform and conservative marriages, not just for democracy, but orthodoxy needs it. The reality is that more and more committed halachic Orthodox Jews understand that pushing down religion, down the throats of Israelis, endears Judaism to no one. It is only if we celebrate the rich rainbow of Jewish choices and shades and colors that we can hope that more and more Israelis will find meaning in their place along this continuum.
Yeah, I do advocate separation of state and religion in Israel. And I think, and I see myself as a Zionist, I represent the Zionist party, and we see Israel as both Jewish and democratic. Now, Jewish doesn't mean only religion. Jewish means history and heritage and family and language and calendar and school system and everything else. And I feel myself not less Jewish than Rabbi Regev or Rabbi Elfant, although he's a Reformed rabbi and he's an Orthodox rabbi, and I'm a secular Jew. But I'm Jewish. I feel Jewish, and I'm 100% Jewish. And nobody has a monopoly on Judaism, on the definition of who is a good Jew. Once somebody asked me from a Haredi newspaper to choose, what do you prefer more? Israel as a Jewish nation or as a democratic nation? I said it's like choosing between your father and your mother. I would like it to be both Jewish and democratic. And in order to maintain this unique combination, we have to allow civil marriage for so many Israeli citizens who cannot fulfill this basic marriage in Israel. This is necessary, and I agree with Rabbi Regev, both for our Jewish, Jewish principle and to our democratic principle.
In addition to my previous colleagues, I want to remind all of you, coming from the States, that the founding fathers of the US advocated, one of them at least, Madison, for the separation of church and state, dafka, to protect religion and to preserve religion. And if we go deeply into sociological convictions, some would say that the American people are much more religious than the Israeli people. And that's where I come from caring about religion. And dafka, in order to save religion from itself, I think that the separation is indeed essential. And on the topic of marriage and divorce, employing game theory, if venues are open, if you introduce civil marriage, you create competition. And just as I said before, most people would still want to enter the religious path, but the religious path would be able to change from within. It would have to change from within. It would have to, using this horrible, threatening word reform, it's not really reform in the sense of the reform movement, but it is employing the mechanisms and the tools that halacha does provide for and making use of them to make these marriages, and especially divorces, just like I said before, more egalitarian, more just, and non-discriminatory for both men and women, and more open. The question of the Jewish identity is not through the issue of divorce. It is indeed the question of conversion. And we have to face that. And we are, I hope, I very much hope, and just like Rabbi Regev said before, with your help, we need to have the whole area of conversions more open, more inclusive. We have to avoid having such horrible personal stories, just like we heard before. It is a shame to hear this story of a woman who was raised as a Jew and find herself unable to marry within Israel because she is not Jewish according to the definition of the rabbinical courts, who have the exclusive right to decide who can marry and who is excluded from being able to marry. We cannot tolerate this situation anymore. But the tool to confront it is within the area of conversion and not on account of women, children, and not on account of preserving this exclusivity of religious marriages.
I realize that I haven't changed the opinions of my fellow panelists yet. Rabbi Feldman wrote a book called Tales Out of Shul. And one of his chapters is about people who create God in their own image. God doesn't really care for him to marry. And God doesn't deal with it whether I eat kosher or not. That's childish. God is such a great spiritual thing that he doesn't deal with those type of things. What's happened to us is, instead of facing the truth, reality, and the damage that's happening to 71% of the marriages in America, or 60% of those who have gotten married since 2000, who have married out, we've tried to fool ourselves by saying that Jewish is culture, Jewish is language, Jewish is gefilte fish. No, Jewish is religion, Jewish is the Torah, Jewish has rules, and we can either keep them or not keep them. But to make up new rules and call it Jewish is not really being intellectually honest.
I love Judaism. I love the Jewish people, and I'm a Zionist. I came to the state of Israel back after my parents settled, and I was born and raised in New York, to fulfill the work that my grandparents started when they helped found kibbutzim in the founding of the state. My fear actually has less to do with our current situation, although it pains me to no end that my daughter won't be allowed to be married in this country. And I'm sure that parents in this audience know how that would feel. My fear is that when I look through the history of the Jewish people, every time that there's a situation in which there is a monopoly over religious control, we've been destroyed. We've been exiled. Just look at how the sages talk about the destruction of the first temple or destruction of the second. Just look at the historic wisdom that Bet Shammai had when they decided to marry Bet Hillel. And my fear is that the state of Israel, in order for it to live up to the lessons that we've learned over the centuries, is governed by individuals who don't have the wisdom of Bet Shammai. Bet Shammai was stricter than Bet Hillel, but if they wouldn't have compromised, if they wouldn't have accepted the difference, there wouldn't be a Jewish people here today. Now, I very much hope that Rabbi Elfant and his cohorts will draw on that wisdom in order to recognize that the openness of our tradition over thousands of years is what's maintained us as a people. And that this state will not exist if we create another situation of Bnei Tzadok. If we create another situation in which we are not enabling the beautiful tapestry of Jewish tradition and conversation to continue. Because right now, it's a monologue. And when people, unfortunately, continue with the monologue, most of the audience leaves. And so I very much hope that the wisdom in the rabbinate will be that of understanding that a rabbi like Rabbi Uri Regev and other rabbis here in the audience have the right, and should have the right, to marry individuals such as ourselves as part of the Jewish tradition.
How can you find a way to help the rabbinate here understand that it's not up to them to define who they are, but living in a modern democratic nation, that it's okay for people, not the rabbis, to decide who they are themselves?
I'm touched by the story of the couple to my right, not because I agree with them, but because we're human beings and I understand it. I would humbly suggest that they would come to my office in Dimona. I would have been able to work it out halachically, and you would have been satisfied. Sometimes when one talks like a mensch, you get results. I'm not telling you, my respect, dear Rabbi, what to do and what to think, but if all of us can decide who we are and what we are and what's right and what's wrong without having to follow rules and regulations, then they don't need me and they don't need you. The job of a rabbi is to lead spiritually and not to follow the masses. Sometimes we're in the minority. It's not pleasant, but that doesn't mean that we're wrong.
There is a subtext to the preservation of the exclusivity of religious marriages and divorces in Israel. And we have to remember that it is not an invention of the State of Israel. It is the legacy from the rule of the Ottoman Empire, the 400 years of rule of the Ottoman Empire here in Palestine, preserved by the British mandate in pre-state Palestine, preserved by the Jewish state when it was established in 1948. But it has become a way for both leaders on both sides of the national conflict here, of Jewish leaders as well as Arab leaders, to have the religion rule over marriages and so restrict the possibility of intermarriage. Now, if there is civil marriage, you cannot enact a law that says only Jew can marry a Jew and Arab can marry an Arab. This is completely impossible. But the fact that there is no civil marriage and there's religion that governs it, and religions, both Jewish religion and Sharia law, does not allow for intermarriage, this is a perfect solution for the politicians, for the leaders on both sides of the conflict. It's not just a question of Judaism from within. It is related to the overall conflict that we unfortunately still live in, and I think it's important to bear that in mind as well.
I really love Israel. I really, really would like to do Aliyah. The However, I'm gay, and so I know that in a lot of ways life here would be a lot more difficult. I wouldn't be able to have my kids here. I wouldn't be recognized. I'm wondering, Rabbi Alfant, if it is worth to you more to preserve your Orthodox view of traditional Jewish marriage at the expense of alienating Jews in the diaspora from having a life in the Jewish state.
You know, again, this discussion to some extent is basically unfair, because if we would present these same arguments to any Supreme Court in the Western world, that a lawyer would say, well, I know the law of this country is such and such, or the Constitution says such and such, but I think that nobody should tell me what to do or what to think, the judge would throw us out of the court. And therefore, I agree, it's unfair sometimes, it hurts sometimes. We have to do our best, and I am one of those voices in the Rabbanut, and while I don't compromise, we do have to help people find solutions, and as was mentioned before, to some extent, there are solutions. Maybe they should be used more. In the case of those who are gunot, today there's very severe punishments of a husband who refuses to give a get, a legal divorce, in the case where it's been ruled that divorce is justified, which is in most cases. And we all have to improve. There's no question the Rabbanut has to improve. But to change the rules, to change the religion, then, you know, we're all out of business.
Let me just tell you, I'm the only openly gay member of the Knesset, so I experience, and I know many people who face the same problems you're facing. I'm facing them myself. Now, let me tell Rabbi Alfant, you know, you can follow the rules you wish to follow and live according to your own strict halachic way of life as you wish. I do not care, I do not interfere. But why do you put me under the same laws that you wish to follow? I mean, we live in a democratic, modern nation state. We do not live in the Middle Ages. We recognize that there are a lot of groups within Israeli or human society which deserve equal rights, and I don't see really the difference between a gay couple and a straight couple. I don't see the difference. There shouldn't be any difference between a gay couple who wish to adopt a kid or a straight couple who wish to adopt a kid. It's not just about marriage here. We're discussing this whole cycle of life of us as human beings in a modern country. And for this to happen, we have to include the gay issue within the new arrangements. And when I talked before about partial agreements that we should not accept, nowadays I tell you that we would not agree to have a partial arrangement on marriage without gay couples. If they think, I don't know what party or what minister, they think that they would enact a new bill of partnership or whatever they call it, or civil marriage, without getting gay couples inside, then it will not pass, because this is a partial agreement that will hurt us a lot, and I'm not a second-class citizen in this country, and I deserve the same and equal rights like everybody else.
I think that you're seeing an increasing extremism in the Rabbanut, at least that's how I feel, and this is the first time that I've been able to engage someone of your status, and I hope it continues, because this is the only way that you can learn about me and I can learn about you, and we can find a common dialogue. You were mentioning to us that if we came to you personally, we would have resolved this issue. One of the problems with this system is that it's gray in regards to, you can find your way if you know who to talk to and you know who can connect you to the right people, and you've got a protexia, as they say, as you've got a network, a high caliber network that can help you. A system shouldn't be like that. If there are rules that dictate within a democratic system what you can and cannot do, they should be clear and they should be consistent, and the way that this world works in Israel, it's not that way. So potentially, yes, we could have found a way to go about the system and gotten somebody to say something to this person, which I've heard stories many, many times from our friends who have been in these issues, but that is not a system I choose to be part of, and that is not a just system.
Just one sentence. I had no intention of deals or wheeling or dealing. I would have convinced you to do what halakhically had to be done in a nice way.
What can we do to support the two positions that you four are urging? During the thousands of years of Jewish history, there's never been one authority. So what can we do to push these two issues forward?
I do think that there is a significant responsibility of the Jewish people globally to press on Israel's representatives to change these laws. These are legal issues. Halakha, one of the things that I love about halakha, and when I was studying Jewish law, I was so drawn to, is its flexibility and the fact that it is heterodox. There has never been that uniform nature, and so. So the problem here in Israel, it doesn't have to do with halakha. Rabbi Elfan can interpret one way, the other way. Rabbi Yosef would have accepted Aaron's mother, another rabbi today won't. Everyone will figure out their own thing. The problem is that the Knesset doesn't allow that. And so the issue is, and this is what most Jews outside the world don't realize, most of the top Knesset representatives, I should say, were elected because of money that came from the diaspora. Not necessarily the diaspora Jews, they also went and raised money in Eastern Europe and in shady deals, but a lot of that, innocent, I'm sorry. But a lot of that support comes from you. And while American Jews have been kind of running after the red flag of one issue or another in terms of lobbying, in terms of issues, the state of Israel has been consistently taking away your rights to be part of this country. Now, what I mean by that is that 20 years ago, Rabbi Yosef would have accepted Aaron's mother's conversion, many other people's mother's conversion. Yes, he actually wrote a paper, a response saying that conversion, we can talk about this, but I know this. The point is that you have been blindsided. You have been blindsided by an ongoing political push to sell your rights down the river. And unfortunately, I'm now bringing myself into this because before I came here, didn't realize this, we have been robbed of our rights and have done nothing while it has happened. And it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to ensure that in every single conversation. So what can you do? Well, first of all, if it's not for us, then who will be? So you have to educate yourselves, you have to educate your communities, and in every single conversation that you have, either as a donor, or as a supporter, or as somebody who is active, this needs to change. It's the top priority. And in this 1 month, or in this 1 year, or in these 2 years, until there's a secular majority in the Knesset, if we do not change this, then we have failed our children, we have failed our grandchildren.
Well, I see I haven't changed too many in the audience either. All right. We'll keep on trying. I'm going to be a bit nasty, but I would say that with Ariel, that with 71% of intermarriage amongst non-Orthodox in America, I think the Jewish community in America has a lot of work to do and should do, and the Federation can definitely play an important part in it before they decide what to do here. There was always a policy that said Jews outside of Israel do not mix into Israeli politics, whether it's right-wing or left-wing, or whether more religious or less religious. I think that's something that, for better or for worse, should be decided here. Mrs. Horowitz, you are right. There was not one united authority over all the thousands of years of Jewish history. But any authority that existed worked within the framework of Jewish law. Ariel is right that in some cases there is a problem of the rights of an individual citizen. I agree with him. But that's the case in any democracy where there's a rule of law, and some people may agree with that law and some people may resent it. That's the situation here. We've done nothing bad, nothing evil. There's room for improvement, but we are trying our best to seek the welfare of the Jewish people.
Yeah, I would like to tell you, you can do 3 things. If you live here and you have the right to vote, please vote for progressive forces in Israel. Second, if you don't have the right to vote, you can support Israeli NGOs, pluralistic NGOs. For instance, just to give you one, there is one very dear to me called Israel Chofshit, who is active on this matter. And third is, if you live outside of Israel, you can put pressure on Israeli officials, starting with the, I don't know, ambassador or even the prime minister who is going to attend this conference, and tell him that you would like equality in marriage and adoptions and conversions in Israel, and you would like the Reform community in Israel, and the conservative community in Israel, and the secular community in Israel, and the gay community in Israel, and whatever community you care for, to have equal rights. And you expect this as Jews, as Zionists, as activists, and as good friends of Israel. That's what you can do.
Just don't be afraid to take part in being critical about what Israel is doing wrong, because there are some things that Israel does do wrong. It does not hurt allegiance to Israel. You have all the rights to criticize and to work to betterment and to make Israel a more egalitarian, a more pluralistic, a better place for all of us. And in supporting, there are so many civil society organizations in Israel about religious freedom, religious pluralism, women's rights, and we need all the help and all the support that you can afford to have us, to give us.
I agree, obviously, with what was said before me in support of religious freedom in Israel. So I'll add just a couple of points. One thing is belief in your ability to effect change. Too many people think that there is nothing you can do to change the reality, that it's something like part of the elements. It is not. It is man-made, it's politically made, and it should be undone by us together. The other thing is, you have shown that when you cared, you could effect change both on the Israeli scene and the international scene. Who is a Jew, as was mentioned before by Nitzan, was countered by a concerted effort of diaspora Jewry and Israelis like our organizations, and it was Netanyahu that listened to you, even though he had written commitments to change the law of return, to undo the Supreme Court ruling, because you cared and you spoke up. 3, this is about the future of the Jewish people. I hear very attentively what Rabbi Elephant was saying. There is a confusion here between unity and uniformity. The worst enemy to unity is coercing uniformity. The idea of a chief rabbinate, which tells everybody, and now it tells even the modern Orthodox, how they should lead their lives, is the antithesis to Jewish unity. It is only celebrating diversity that's going to make us one. How concretely to do it? There is the Jewish concept, Sur merava setov, turn away from evil and do good. Indeed, support the organizations who work in the field here, who work in your own communities for Jewish pluralism and diversity and freedom. And spell it out. The last thing you should do is what happened last week in Jerusalem. Over 100 Jewish leaders and professionals came together to discuss the Prime Minister Netanyahu's initiative for bonding the next generation with Israel. Not one spoke up about the fact that if the majority of that next generation is not going to be able to enjoy equal legal rights in Israel, all these efforts are going to be for naught. So speak up. The worst thing that you can do is retreat to silence.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.